Hi, my name is Charles Bauer and I work in product development at Top Flite Models. This is to be the first in a series of tapes to demonstrate some of our products. This one will be MonoKote 1, or the first beginning kind of application of MonoKote. Now here on the table we've got several of the products we're going to be using today. First of all, we have several colors of MonoKote itself. There are many more and new ones are coming out each year. We have the kit that we've built and that we're actually going to cover during this demonstration. The trim iron, our MonoKote iron, and the heat gun. These are the tools, kind of. Now, in addition, the other things that you will need is some sort of a straight edge. I prefer this T-shaped aluminum bar that can be used then for cutting the MonoKote so we get nice straight edges. The standard hobby knives, the number 11 blades. Small 6-inch scale when we do have to measure a few things, and an entire box of single-edged razor blades. These can be purchased in any hardware store. Now to get ready to do the actual covering, first thing we want to talk about a little bit is the kit itself. We built the kit in the 3 seconds, and here we are all set to go. Now the important thing is that MonoKote doesn't hide anything. If you've got any nicks, pieces of glue, pinholes and everything else, everything has to be finished and sanded smoothly. Notice here that we have the elevator and the rudder. We're going to hinge with MonoKote this time, so they're here again all sanded. Fillets have been put in, whatever your preference is for the fillets, either the epoxy type or some other kind of filler. But the main thing is that everything is nice and smooth up and down, all your edges, so that when we put the MonoKote on, nothing will poke through. The MonoKote won't hide anything when we do it. Everything has to be here. We have our tools here ready to go, the MonoKote iron, and we set it somewhere approximately 3 on the dial. That's in the right neighborhood. The trim iron with the small shoe, which is used for the fillets, cockpit areas, engine compartments, and so on. Again, that's set on high for MonoKote. And the heat gun, which we will be using when we cover large open surfaces. In addition, I have my knives, razor blade, and everything is all set to go. And I think the best thing to do is let's get started right now. All right, the very first thing is you have to decide where we're going to start on the plane. The rule of thumb is very simple. Start with the smallest areas and work to the larger areas. Well, the smallest areas, in the case of an aircraft like this, we talk about these little fillets that are in here. We want to cover those first, and there's 4, either side of the fin and either side of the stabilizer. So that'll be first. Then this small section at the rear of the fuselage. Do our hinging. We're going to use MonoKote hinges, upper and lower surfaces of the stab, and then the fuselage sides, and last the wing. So that's what we're going to do. So if we talk now first about the fillets, I want to get some MonoKote out here. And the first thing we're going to do is just cut a piece off here that we can use to cut our fillet material. So I'll just cut quickly a piece here. And now what I want to do is cut some strips that are about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch wide, somewhere in that area. And I have my first strip. Let's start with that. I will have to get rid of the backing on this. Remember that MonoKote has a clear coating or backing on it that you have to take off before you put it on. We'll get rid of that. And now we're set. First step is to cut a piece for this fillet between the fin and the fuselage. We want a piece that's about 1 inch longer at either end. So we'll get that. Now what we have to do is apply this so that the center of the strip ends up right in the fillet, right down the fillet like that. The way to do that, the most convenient way, is with using the small trim tool. I want to tack it just at the back here and then work my way forward, but I'm only going to be fastening it to, in this case, the fuselage one side. Work my way along, keeping it centered, And if you feel you're getting off-centered, you can loosen it up a little bit and work down so you're all the way down front to the rear, and get that sealed down well all the way along. Then we'll turn it and now seal the fin side, and again with the iron. And when you're sure this is down well into the corner, then we have to finish off the rear and the front edge. Well, we'll trim this down flush, iron it down back here, so we've got a nice edge to work with, and trim it off. And there's the rear. Now the front edge, if you remember the shape of the fin here, we have this curve here. We can't just bend all the material over. We're going to have to actually cut it so that we do it in segments. There's little slits in it, and then we can get it in the corner and roll it over the edge, down all the way to the flat top surface. Trim off this front edge, and finally trim off the overhang here on the other side. And there we have down all the way. Check everything. All your edges are down. And that's the first of the 4 fillets that will appear on the fuselage. The other ones that we'll be doing one after the other is the other side of the rudder, and then we'll work on the stab. Now that we've finished both of the fillets on the fin, let's look at the stabilizer area there. Again, we want to cut a piece of our strip. It's going to be about 1 inch or so longer on either side, and we're going to place that right in the corner using our small iron here. Again, we'll tack it only to one side to start out with. In this case, it'll be the stab. Get it down all the way along. And that's down. And we turn it around. Work on the fuselage side. Always do one of the sides of the fillet completely before you do the other one. All right, now we do a little trimming here in the front a little bit, and the notch to wrap it. And so you can do these fillets with the large iron, particularly in case these are not very sharp radius curves, but the small iron does make it a little bit easier to handle and get into these little corners. Make sure you get all these edges sealed down well. All right, we have the back rear edge to trim, and trim it down that way, and there we finish off the corner, and there we have the fillet here. Good idea whenever you're doing, as soon as you finish a second, rub your finger over the edge, because you can immediately feel if there's any loose edges, and make sure they're all down. Now we have this side, the fin, fillet, and the stabilizer all completed. All right, the next step after we've completed the fillets is we want to get ready for the hinging. We have our elevator here. We're going to hinge it to the rear of the stabilizer, and then the rudder to the rear of the fin. We're going to use all MonoKote hinges. So what we have to start out with, we have 4 strips cut here, but if I look kind of at the total length of my elevator and the rudder, I need 4 pieces that are as long as of the surfaces I'm going to try to hinge. All right, let's get these out of the way here for a minute. And first thing is we'll take one of our strips here, and we want to cut a piece that's about 1/2 inch or so longer on either end for the first edge. What we're going to do with this is simply fold it over the hinged edge and seal it down. Now we want to center it, so if we start at one edge here and let it extend over a little bit and center it, and now we're using the iron, and get this thing all centered all the way down so that we can cover that entire surface. All right, got it sealed down the leading edge or the hinge edge line, and now I'm going to simply fold it over on the one side, lightly always first, and then we go back over it to make sure it's down well. In fact, we can lay it down to do that. Ironed toward the open edge all the way along. On one side, then we'll turn the whole thing over and now do the same thing on the other side. Make sure it's down, always ironing away from the folded edge toward the open edge. Back and forth till it's sealed down. This is the base for our hinging that we're going to do. And we trim the edges. There. Now we have the first of the surfaces, and then we're going to do the same thing to the rudder. All right, after we've finished covering, you notice all of the hinge edges. We have the fin, stabilizer, here's the elevator, and the rudder. They're all covered and we're ready for hinging. We're going to end up with these two surfaces together and hinged. All right, let's get ready for making the hinge itself. We need two strips, again, about 1 inch wide or so. And now we have to iron these together, but with the adhesive sides together, and we're going to overlap, a 1/4 inch roughly. Now, how do you tell if you're on the adhesive side or the other side? Well, you can just test with your iron a little bit. And if you touch the adhesive side, you'll pick up the MonoKote, so you can tell right away. That's adhesive side up. This one, adhesive side down, and we now overlap 1/8 to 1/4 inch. We're going to touch at a few places. And then iron the strip all the way along. Just use the heat to seal it. We have one long continuous piece that has adhesive side up on this half and adhesive side down on that half. Now to make our hinges, we want to cut our hinges, about 1 inch wide. So if we go along and cut them, 1, 2, 3, and so on down the line. We'll cut as many hinges as we need. That's why I started out with 2 strips that were as long as the total surface I wanted to hinge, so that when I'll have enough here. All right, we're going to apply the hinges to the elevator surface first, all the way along, and then put it on the stabilizer. We start in the middle and apply the first hinge. Now, if you roll it over the edge back and forth like this, maybe you can even see it, but where it's overlapped, it's a little stiffer, and we want to center that right on the edge. Okay, we'll iron this first one down. Now, we've got it sealed to the MonoKote edge and to the wood itself. Now we're simply going to alternate our hinges. Keep turning it over. We put the hinges on about 1/16 inch apart. And then we'll do the entire surface, just going back and forth, putting the hinges on. If you start in the center, then you'll always end up with the same number of hinges on both sides, and it comes out even. Keep turning it over, working. Again, if you pick up a hinge, now you lose track of which is the adhesive side. I quickly touch it with the iron. I see adhesive is on here, so it goes down. Center it and iron. And then we are going to finish this entire strip. All right, we've now completed our hinging on the one surface. Kind of looks like a checkerboard down here. Remember, they're alternating from one side to the other all the way down the entire length. And now we want to get ready to put it on the other edge. So what we want to do is insert it up here. You notice how these are bent over. In fact, you iron them a little bit, they will stay apart so that we can separate bottom hinges on bottom, top on top. And now what we want to do is hold the two surfaces together and iron down these hinges that were sticking up to go to the surface. Just work your way along. Hold everything down flat and iron. Pull it flat, and iron. Now the other side in the same way. Hold it together, flat, iron, iron it down, iron it down. There, now we've done one side. All these, don't worry about all these bumps. These are the hinges that go onto the other side now. You have to turn it over and do the same thing. Hold them tight and iron, pull, iron, pull, and iron right up down the line. Notice how quick and easy this is hinging, particularly when you have surfaces such as these that are only 1/8 of an inch thick. There, and the last one here. All right, now it's on, and again, like everything else we do, now we want to go back over and make sure that everything is down completely. On that side, same thing on this side. And all the edges are down. And I want to make sure that it's sealed well here. In between, I would hold it at 90 degrees and just run the iron down there to make sure all those little edges are down where they should be on one side, and the same thing on the other. Okay, now you can see the hinge. It's very flexible. You can travel all the way, smooth, will never stiffen or get hard on you. Now to finish up the hinging on our rudder, we have the last hinge here, and we'll get that put on. And you'll notice that I've ended up with 5 hinges, which is about the minimum to center it. So I made the hinges slightly narrower than I did on the elevator, but I have 5 here now, and I'm ready to insert that. In the same fashion, we line up and iron down hinges on one side. The rudders get a little tricky because they're small, but just carefully line it up. And there's one hinge, 2, and the bottom one, 3, and now turn it over and do the other side. 1, 2, and now they're all on, and then you go over everything to make sure all these edges are down. And we're sealed. Okay, and there we have both of our surfaces hinged, and we'll be ready for the next step. All right, the next thing now is we want to cover the surfaces of the stab in the elevator. Again, you want a piece of MonoKote longer and a little bit wider than you actually need. Make sure that one of the edge, this one here, is very straight. And we want to line that up so it's exactly right over your hinge line. And start toward the center and work out. Again, very little pressure. Let the heat do the work for you. Work out so you don't get any wrinkles. You don't want to push on it. And work in all directions. Get the edges down. You don't want anything to come up later on. All right, we've got it there. Now you notice the fuselage was here, so we want to cut there from that point out. And trim this right away. And we get our, there. Now, the next thing is to get all these edges over, like that. Sometimes it's easier to handle if we trim this so we can pull it around. All right, now, here's what we're going to do is roll this edge over using the iron, again, with very light pressure on the straight edges, leading edge, and then work to the tip here. And the way you want to do that is just work slowly back and forth, and move up over the curved surface, and the MonoKote will shrink and conform to your edge. Just slowly, a little bit at a time, till you've rolled the edge over. All right, now trimming. Again, I prefer this regular straight edge blades, and we want to trim at the top edge. There. And just trim all the way around. There. Now go back and do the final rolling of the edge. And that, and now we've got the little part on the fuselage. Check carefully that you've got it down all the way around. You see how the edge, now it's a nice straight cut all the way along here that just comes to the top surface. So when we cover the top and overlap the other way, we'll end up with about 1/8 of an inch overlap all the way around. Next will be the upper surfaces. Again, we have our piece roughly cut, and we're going to lay it right along the hinge line. And a little bit of it folded up at the fuselage. Get it lined up. Now we have to mark this because this is an angle cut here. It won't be at right angles to the hinge line. The easiest way I find to do it is just take your fingernail, run it along in there, back and forth a couple of times. When you take the piece out and lay it down, the line, and you probably can't see it, but it's there, and now I'm going to trim off at that angle. All right, we'll try it'll fit again. Now, this is to overlap and go right up to the very corner where your fillet is. Make sure it fits in there. All right, got it laid down, and again we'll start with the iron in the center and kind of work our way out. This keeps the air bubbles from forming because you're forcing them to the edges all the time. And you work in all directions. Get it down. Now notice you can see already how the fillet works now. It's in there, and we bring this piece right up to it, and you see no seam there at all. Get it all the way to the edges. Now we'll do our rough cut. And now go back to rolling the edge as we did the lower surfaces. Again, we do the straight leading edge part first, roll that over, and then we'll take the curved part, working very slowly back and forth, roll it, it will shrink and conform as you roll this over, a little bit at a time. And we're all the way down when you're sure. Again, now we're ready to cut. Again, the same thing. We want to cut holding the razor blade flat against the other surface and run it around. Notice with the sharp blades, it just rolls. If it catches at all, your blade is dull and you need a new one. Okay, now we go back, finish off rolling these seams down. And you can rub your finger over and you'll feel that there's one little loose spot here. There, now if you take a look, you can't see that there's a seam right along this edge, but it's invisible because it's down. Now for one of the fuselage sides. And again, we need our long, large strip now of MonoKote, longer and a little wider than the entire fuselage side. This particular fuselage is flat all the way along. The only trimming we're going to have to do before trying to apply is have a little notch in the MonoKote here so we can put it on and have an overhang of about 1 inch or so at the bottom. So if we kind of line this up a little bit, we see our notch should probably be about here somewhere. And you can use either your long straight edge or the short little scale that we had here. And we'll see, we'll cut up about 1 inch and then cut that segment out. I'm going to cut it out here so we have a nice square little corner that's going to fit over the stab. There we are. Now, again, the idea will be, as we put it on, you'll see, is to get it tacked down the center of the fuselage and then work each way. All right, so we're going to line up here. We have to start with our notch because that's where it has to fit. Again, we want the cut line here to end right and the fillet there. Get it laying down. Now we're going to start with the iron, and I would probably tack right here first at that corner because that's the critical place. Then working toward the rear and the center, a little bit at a time, toward the center, all the way along. So we have almost a line adhered down the very center. Okay. And check it from both directions. And then simply what we're going to do is hold light pressure and iron up from that center line all the way along here. We get all the way up. And do it the same way on the other side. Light pressure and get it all down to the edges. All right, and it's on all the way down. You work back and forth several times to make sure you have all of the very edges sealed down and that you're right to the corners. Now, the idea is we have to overlap this. This happens to be the bottom of the aircraft, and then when we cover the bottom, we will overlap up the side. But we don't want that side from the bottom to come up too far on here, so we'll overlap this and get it down so when we do our cutting, we're going to cut in about 1/8 of an inch or so from the very corner edge. So the bottom will be on flat, and the final seam will be right along the very corner. So again, like we did the tail surface, we work it around all these corners slowly. Start at one edge and just work your way around. Now remember, the front of this plane was curved like that, so we'll have a little curving to do there of working it down. And it works to all the edges. Work around. Don't worry about pulling it around or anything like that. Just light pressure where you need it. Now, here's another little problem that comes up. You can see here on the front we have this rather sharp little corner here. So what we want to do there is cut right from that edge out the MonoKote. This way we can get this part bent over the edge and the forward section. There. Again, here, the top of the cabin area, we come up and there's a sharp corner there and there's one back here. So we'll do the same thing, slitting the MonoKote there and here. This way, since these are straight lines, each of these will lay down and we won't get any wrinkles there. And work back here. Again, see the curve here of the fuselage. This is gradual, but still, if you try to roll the MonoKote over, you see what happens. It's loose up here in the air. So you want to put several cuts in there. The sharper the curve, the closer together that you put these cuts, so that we can work on each part, holding it and rolling it over. And then the next section, and the next one. And keep on going right down the line. Get an idea now why we always recommend that you leave a little bit. You have to be able to hold this material. If you try to cut it too closely, then you won't be able to do anything with it. All right, let's see. This gets fairly flat back here. I'd probably still cut maybe once more there. Just roll it over the edge. Now, you got to be a little careful when you get back here. Remember, our rudder is up here, and we don't want to iron this to the rudder, so just hold your iron. You just want to roll barely over that edge a little bit. We have the back corner here, again, cut out. So we can pull, see, around the back of the fuselage there. Get that side down. And I think we have it down all the way. The last part now will be this front curve. And we want to work on that the same way that we did the tips. We have a very sharp curve here at the front, so we'll probably have to put some tension on the MonoKote and heat it with the iron, and when you get to the right temperature, you feel it give slightly, and then roll the edge all the way around. Okay, I think we've got it down all the way around now. Cutting, now we have to trim. Now we want to remember that we don't want to cut right at the very edge, we want to cut in about 1/8 of an inch. All the way around. It takes a little practice with this. Usually what you want to do is try to use your fingers as a guide. I'll cut this easy, straight one first. And your finger rides along the very edge. And you see here, I haven't ironed it down yet, but you can see I've got about 1/8 of an inch even all the way along there, and then I can put that down. Do it section at a time, carefully. Get your guide with your finger along there and run your blade down very lightly. You don't want to cut into the balsa really. All you want to do is trim the MonoKote. A little bit at a time. Next section, same way. Trim 1/8 of an inch. Now this one I just cut off here at the front because we've got into the start of the roll here. And again, get this side down and then work this surface by heating and working it, rolling it over very, very slowly all the way around. This is going to be the engine compartment. So we want to make sure that these inner edges where it's rolled over are really sealed down, and then when we're all finished, we'll seal that entire area with an epoxy or resin of some type. All right, after you finish trimming, you see here all the way along we have that about 1/8 inch overlap, and it's all down. So this side is now complete. The next step would be, of course, to cover the other side in the same exact way. To save time, because actually to cover a plane like this, we're talking probably 6 or 7 hours total work, and I don't think you'd want to sit through that much tape. I'm now going to just show how we would do the bottom, which would end up with this kind of a line cutting along here. So we'll assume both sides are now covered. Again, get your piece ready with a little more length than you need, so you've got something to grab, and we want to center it on here. And start right there, and we're centered here. Lay it down, and again, start in the center with a few light touches, just to hold it there. Maybe one of the things you want to do is you get kind of a feel, but if you want to, you can check. Just turn it over. See, it's stuck on there, just barely, but it's enough to hold it. And again, we're going to do the same thing. Light pressure. It doesn't mean grab and pull it loose or something like that. Just the light pressure. And work our way to the edge. Don't roll over it this time. The first step is to get it all down from the center to the edge. Very light pressure all the way along. Now if you remember, right in here, I can feel it. You can't see it. There's a groove for the landing gear. We'll take care of that after we get the rest of this done. All right, so we got it to the edge, and we're all the way up to the front on that side. And then I would turn it around and do the same thing again with your light pressure, working from the center to that edge all the way along here. Center out. This way you keep forcing any air that may be trapped in there to the edge. Okay. That looks like I've got it down all the way along. All right, let's get back over here now. We have, remember, the side of the fuselage goes underneath 1/8 of an inch. This one we want to roll just to the very corner Well, at this one I won't have to put any slits in because there aren't any corners or drastic changes of direction. And the trimming, again, we want to trim so that when we're trimming, our razor blade is flat on the surface of the side. Be careful you don't dig it in and take a gouge. You hold very lightly. Now, I prefer to start not at the very edge. It's very difficult sometimes to get a start. But here, I have my razor blade in, and I'm going to cut to the rear. You see how that edge, and it's just barely at the corner there. Hold it up, run your blade along. If it catches, again, your blade is dull, and get rid of it and get a new one right away. Okay, now we'll go along and seal that down, from front to back, very carefully. These are the final seams, and they have to be down. Now, when you get this really down, again, just rub your finger over it. You'll catch any loose little edge that shows up anywhere along the line, a little bit right there. And you'll see that if I try to move this around, you cannot see where that seam is in any position, in any way that you turn it. It's right at the corner there, and that's where you want to end up with all of your seams. Now, after both sides have been finished in this manner, then we have here at the engine compartment, again, the final finishing, and this has to be trimmed so that you can fold it in exactly inside the compartment there, and you want it to go in there, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, again, that you can seal later with epoxy or resin. Little parts, you have to take your time. There. And now I can roll this edge over and get that sealed down, and I have this edge and this edge, so all those little corners are down inside the compartment. I would finish both sides like that, and then when it's all covered, I will coat the entire interior there to seal down those edges so no fuel can get in it. Now for the wing. The hard part's really done, the fuselage. Wings are usually much easier to do. We have it again, it's all sanded and ready to go. The total idea, so you know what direction we're going, is we're going to cover the bottom of the wing in 2 pieces. Bottom first, do our overlaps, and then the top. All right, again, I have a piece of MonoKote here that's already cut, so I give myself, 2 inches on either side and a little more at the tips. Depending on how curved they are, the more you're going to need. Okay, so we'll get started here. And lay the MonoKote in position. Our center seam is over here. We want to go about 1/4 of an inch past it, make sure that we're flat and square on there. And the wings we do by going around, touching all of the edges first, just lightly. Again, it's that idea that if we pick it up and hold it, the MonoKote will just lay there still. And we finish by going around several times, sealing it down all the way around. We're going to heat shrink this in the center, and if the edges are loose, the whole thing will pull loose on you. So go around 2 or 3 times, and when you're sure it's down, then go over it once more, just to make sure. Okay. And we're ready. Now again, we can use the iron and very light pressure. In fact, you just fingertip pressure, and we can start shrinking a panel one at a time, working like this. And there's my first panel, and I can work to the second, third, and so on. But I do want to show you how to use the heat gun. Now, here's the heat gun again. Has a 2-position switch. One is cold air and one is hot air. Make sure that you know which way is the warm air. Now this puts out a constant heat. It's about 400 degrees right here at the tip, so you have to be very careful. You'll burn a hole right through the MonoKote. The idea when you were going to apply it, and I will be holding it in this case like this so that I can blow the air on, always directing the air away from an edge. I don't want to heat that edge at any time or else I'll pull the MonoKote loose. So let's see if I start here now. Turn it on, work with it, and it'll start shrinking. You want to keep moving. The closer you are to the MonoKote, if I'm very close, I have to move fast. If I get away about 3 inches, I can go at a little more slow pace. Work yourself back and forth. Again, see, I'm always keeping the air directed away from the edges that I've sealed down. And as I work my way down the wing, don't forget that I've got this edge over here sealed, so at some point I'm going to turn around and work from the other direction to shrink it. Always keeping air directed away from the edges. And I can work until all the wrinkles are gone. Now you can check carefully. You can look in a light at the side and you see everything is there. Now as soon as you've done something like this, particularly with the heat gun, let it set for just a moment until it cools down. Because while it's hot, the adhesive will move on you. All right, now remember we had our tip here. In this case, this tip block is simply at a 45-degree angle from the wing itself. So I can just roll it down. It's a straight, flat bottom wing, so I'm not going to have any problem in rolling this edge over. And there we are. Okay, now we're down. Now the next step will be this rolling of the edges in the same fashion that we worked with some of the other. I want a light pressure, hold it, and work my iron all the way along. Light pressure, work the iron, do the straight edges first. That's the leading and trailing edge in the case of this wing. Light pressure, run the iron down the edge. Okay, now we have the tip here where I have to pull the material up. Now this top surface is curved all the way along there, so I'm going to have to be very careful. Make sure we're down here and then just lightly start the roll. In this case, I just barely want to roll over the edge because when I cover the top, I'll be coming around this way and put my seam right there at the very edge. Okay, I think we got that down. We're now to the trimming. Again, the best way I find to do this is to use my finger as a guide and run the blade along. Again, don't cut into the balsa. You don't want to cut the wing apart. Run it all the way along in one smooth motion. And now you can see this edge. I've cut it straight up about 1/8 of an inch over that front part. And I will then use the iron and roll this down completely. Now we've finished the trimming, and you'll notice how all these edges all the way around, I've tried to get it just rolled over the edge about 1/8 of an inch. Again, use your check. Maybe you can hear that, but where there's a loose edge, you'll feel it and hear it, and you get that down. Tip the same way. It's just rolled over this edge 16ths to 1/8 of an inch all the way around, including the front edge, and we're sealed. This panel is finished. See the edges? You can barely see them around the edge here. That's just what you want, so when we cover the top and go over the edge, again, the seam will be hidden. Now for the top of the wing, the same way as before, we have our piece of MonoKote. We're about inch and a half on the straight sides, and we've got several inches overhang at the front. I'm going to do the same thing. The alignment to start with is what makes much easier. You make sure that you're not slanted off like this, and you'll get to one side and have part of the wing showing. So I usually do it, hold the MonoKote like this, and then just move both hands and slide it about the inch or so that I want for overhang. I'm about 1/4 of an inch past the center, and it looks like it's in position there. I'm just, again, going to work my way around, touching all the way around to get the edges all down before I start any kind of shrinking. Again, you want to do this so you don't end up with any large wrinkles somewhere. And now I've got it tacked. I will go back and seal the edges completely. All right, there's the leading edge and the center. Now work the tip, sealed, and then the trailing edge all the way along. Always do it at least one more time than you think is necessary to make sure all those edges are down. All right, again, we can start the shrinking. Light pressure on the iron, work one panel at a time, very lightly, let the heat do the work for you. And you work front and back till it's all shrunk up tight and all the wrinkles are gone. For these large surfaces, again, let me get my heat gun here. Remember what we said, that we'd always point the gun away from the edges where it's tacked down and work that way. Okay, and start to shrink this material. See how I don't know if you can see the wrinkles disappearing. It's always very difficult to see them, but they do go away as you work the material. Tilt the wing forward, do this panel, slowly rotate it, go back, and aim from the outside toward the center. And another panel I'm working. Work from this side. And keep working toward the center. There, I'm about up to here shrunk. Now I'm going to start at the tip and work that toward the other way so that I end up actually shrinking the very center of the wing as the last part. Keep turning it around. And it's all going down. A lot of people always ask whether it's better to use the iron or the gun for this kind of thing. The gun is simply a little quicker. I can do the entire wing with an iron, like that. And I always finish up with the iron anyway to get the little, there might be a few wrinkles here and there, because I'm kind of trying to be very careful at the corners so that I don't loosen the MonoKote and then have trouble trying to get it down if it's loose. Work this slowly, work any air bubbles. If for some reason you end up with a wrinkle, there's always something you can do. If you lightly heat your MonoKote, you can lift it up and rework it down again. Lift lightly only with the heat on, though, or else you'll pull the adhesive and the pigment right off the back of it. Okay, let's see, make sure I've got the edges here all the way. There. Now, again, we get to the point of rolling the edges, light pressure, roll it over. Straight edges, leading and trailing edges first, and then do the tip afterwards. Light pressure, get it down. Okay, now remember what the tip shape looks like. It's up at a 45-degree angle from here, and the top is flush with the top curved surface. Now, let me get this turned around here. See if you can see this in some way. Again, I'm going to grab it, and that's why I want the material, and pull with some pressure. I will feel the MonoKote begin to give as it gets to the appropriate temperature, and roll that edge over. Then we're ready for trimming. Same way, get your blade in, run it along. Got that. Now I've got that edge cut and it's loose. And now I'm going to roll that edge completely over and down. And we're all set with the trailing edge, and now I'm going to do the same thing for the leading edge. Same idea, run your blade along. roll the edge down, and iron it. Tip, again, I've rolled over. When I pulled this a little bit, I'm just past the center line of the corner, so I can take my razor blade flat to the surface and trim this, and trim this, and now finish up the wing tip, getting it down. When you think you're done, then again, I just rub my hand outward where you know your joints are. There's a little tiny spot there I missed. And work my way around so that all of these are down. And there I have the upper and lower surface covered on one side. Now that you've finished covering your entire wing, in the case for the demonstration purpose, I've only covered half. Remember, we finished the wing completely, top and bottom, and all the edges are sealed around. Now I want to show you just a little bit of trimming. Now, MonoKote can be put directly over MonoKote, but if they're large pieces, you will trap air between the two surfaces and it will show. So what we can do, though, is if we use rather narrow strips. I've cut 4 colors here into strips about 3/4 of an inch wide. And now what I'm going to do is try to end up with a pattern that's going to be yellow, then the orange right next to it, and then the red, and then the purple to get kind of the effect of changing the colors across there. All right, we're going to start out with the yellow. And the way I'm going to apply this, I've turned my iron down, so I've lowered the heat. All I want to do is activate the adhesive but not cause any air bubbles. So I'm down to about number 2 or the middle range of heat. Start out by tacking this at the leading edge, and you may notice with some colors that as you heat them they slightly change color, but as soon as they cool down they return to their original color. Now I'm going to hold this stripe with tension on it, but keeping it straight so I don't get any buckles or wrinkles along one edge. And you work it back and forth, you have to watch it, and keep tension on it. And now just lightly touch, working from the edge that you started, the tacked edge, in this case the leading edge, and keep working back very gradually, just with the light edge of the iron. And you'll feel the MonoKote is actually getting longer as I'm doing this. It keeps stretching just a little bit as I work my way back. Okay, and there I have one stripe on. Again, the way to always check is kind of rub your fingers over and you'll feel the loose edges. Do the same thing now. I'm going to start with the orange stripe, carefully lining it up here, right next to it. I don't want to overlap these. I just want to put it up right next to it, so I don't get too many thicknesses of the MonoKote. Again, tack the front. Get your back edge lined up right next to it. Keep the tension. Work your way back. I use the edge of the iron kind of, and just work back so I don't trap any kind of air bubbles between. There's 2. Now we go to number 3 here. Same thing, lined up. Front edge secure. Get your slight tension on here, and again, work your way back. And 3, and 1 more. This kind of shading effect, you can have your choice with all the colors of MonoKote. You just make up your own set. I kind of like this and use it on several airplanes. Makes them very easy to see in the air with the white background and then the various colors. Another little hint you might think about is when you're doing designs on the wings, always do a different pattern on the bottom than on the top. It's nice to know what direction you are, up or down. Okay, and there's my 4 stripes. Again, I'm going to roll edges now and trim parallel. Notice with the sharp blade, you just run along and they trim right off. No jagged edges or anything. Front edge, just want to turn around a little easier, and take my blade and run along 2, 3, 4. Oops, I got one little part here at the corner. I'll just cut there. And trimmed, and there I think we have a nice looking simple pattern on the wing. And this could be repeated then on the stab, possibly on the side of the fuselage, whatever way you want. If If I were doing this kind of a pattern on the reverse side of the wing, I'd either angle it a different direction or maybe run the stripes right down near the leading edge or something like that. Now for the bottom, we're going to trim with our 4 color stripes here, but we're just going to put it on a little different kind of pattern. I'm going to angle them across in this direction. Again, thing to do, whether you start which way you want them to run, I think I'll run from this corner to about here. So what I'm going to start out is, again, tack them at one edge and keeping it tight so I don't get any wrinkles and straight across. Again, work with the edge of the iron all the way down the stripe till you get it sealed down and end at the corner here. Okay, there's the yellow. Now, again, get it right up next to it. The next color is orange. Front edge tacked, keeping it tight. Line up and run your iron down. The 2 colors are not overlapped. I'm just putting them one right next to the other so I don't get too many thicknesses of MonoKote. And the red. Tack the front, line up, tension, and work my way down. And the final stripe, purple, tack, get your alignment here, run it down, and there. And I have this kind of a pattern. Now I have to trim these. You can just barely see at the edge here, I think, where the other ones, how they just came over the edge, and I want to do the same thing here because I don't want these to show from the top. So I've got them lined up, and I'm going to trim 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's put the edges down. So I can see this one, because remember the wing is curved down and this is on the bottom. And for these, I think I'll just let them run over the tip like this. I think that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I get a little bit of color on the tips and trim 3, 4. Get all the little corners down, and now we have a wing with this type of pattern. Let's see, and if we turn it over, see it's entirely a different type of pattern on the top and bottom. Different size, width of stripe, and different effect that you get. Turning it one way or the other. You can certainly tell which is the upper and lower surface of the wing. Now that we've just about finished the plane, I wanted to give you some idea of what it looks like. We still haven't finished this other wing, but I did install all the radio and landing gear and engine and everything on the fuselage and get some idea of what it looks like finished. Remember the trim that we did on the wing, very simple, our straight stripes this way. Now you'll notice that I did the same type of thing on the stab and elevator, only narrower stripes because we have a smaller surface. And also on the front of the fuselage, the same pattern is repeated, the yellow, orange, red, and purple. Notice the cabin area. What you do there is I simply cut out and remove the white from the fuselage side, used the piece I cut out as a pattern for the silver, put that in, cut some narrow stripes of black, and outlined it. So there's our plane, about 95% done. I'll finish the other wing tonight, and we'll be all set for flying on